I love you, Cleveland. And I love you, Ohio. And a very pleasant welcome to this week's version of Bonus Time with Drennan here on the Big Play Sports Network. Great to have you with us this week. Lots to cover, of course, as we get this college football season underway in earnest, and then the NFL campaign next week. I'm Bruce Drennan, along with Ryan Smith, my producer. How are you, Ryan?
Well, I'm doing very good, Bruce. Unfortunately, I cannot say the same about our Guardians.
Yeah. I'm concerned. I'm worried. I think they're going to make the playoffs, but I want that divisional crown for home field advantage, at least in one series. But we'll get to that in just a minute. We're going to give you, if you missed last week's show, I gave you my NFC divisional predictions. Today here in the first segment, I'll give you my AFC divisional predictions. And then in the second segment, we're going to dive into this first full week of college football. And Mark Lawrence, the editor-publisher of the Playbook, playbooksports.com, will be joining us, as he will every week throughout the football season. And we'll dive into those big games. And then, of course, as always, the third segment is the Ask Bruce segment. So here we go, 6-1. The Guardians get beat by Kansas City for the third game in a row here on this homestand. And Scott Barlow, seventh inning, was doomsday for the team. That decided the ball game. He gave up 3 earned runs on 2 hits with a walk. That's all she wrote. Gavin Williams, 5 innings of work, did his job, in my opinion. He gave up the 2 runs on 3 hits and 5 innings of work. He walked 2. He struck out 6, but he did his job. He kept them in the game. But the bullpen, with Scott Barlow especially. And it was only Barlow because Sandlin came in and relieved Williams in the 6th inning and got a flawless inning. And then Barlow came in. And you can't knock Barlow either, Ryan, because he's been very good, as has the rest of that bullpen all season long for the Guards.
Yeah, listen, they're on a historic pace. We bring up the statistics, arguably the best bullpen season there's ever been in history, right, since in the modern era. So they're bound to break eventually, but unfortunately it comes at a time when the rest of the team is breaking, so that gets, of course, emphasized.
And, 4 Kansas City relievers combined for 5 perfect innings following the 2-hour and 14-minute rain delay. The win launches Kansas City into a tie with the Cleveland Guardians for first place in the American League Central. Both teams now with identical 75 and 58 records. Cleveland has led the division since April 13th. As of this recording, it's August 28th. Think of that. April 13th. To August 28th. And here we're tied. And I'll tell you another bad thing, as tight as this division is now, this race, Kansas City clinched the tiebreaker. If we wind up in a tie with Kansas City, they wind up as the divisional champion by securing the best head-to-head record against our team. They're now 7-2 against the Guards with 4 to go. Now, in the 3 games of this series, the Kansas City bullpen has allowed just 2 runs in 16 2/3 innings. My God, Ryan, that sounds like our pen.
Yeah, it's tough. Like, I want to give credit to Kansas City's bullpen. They were amazing. But then again, I almost want to put more blame on just the Guardians' offense becoming dormant, really, since, June, they've been playing 500 baseball, Bruce. I think now worse than 500 baseball, actually.
Stephen Kwan, all season long, was leading the league in hitting. But what has happened to him? His batting average has now dipped below 300. I mean, my God, what was he? Or 350, 360 even?
There was a time, Bruce, when he was coming back from the injury, when he was out for about a month, and he wasn't qualified for the title yet, but he was at 397. 397.
He's a 299 right now. Almost a 100-point percentage drop. Amazing. Naylor. Josh Naylor. We'll get to his brother in a minute. Josh Naylor, last 7 games, is hitting .87. That's a killer too, Ryan. Last 30 games for Naylor, Josh. 220 batting average. 220. His brother Bo is now hitting 204. Rocchio's hitting 206. Freeman is hitting 206. Wow. We were able to condone the low batting averages in the bottom half of our lineup because these guys were picking each other up from game to game with clutch hits in key situations during these games. It didn't matter what the batting average is. If you got a 220 hitter that comes up there with ducks on the pond and delivers in the 7th or 8th inning that ties the game or overtakes the opposition or clinches the victory, who cares what his batting average is? Every day it seemed like it was a different guy. Well, now it seems to be catching up with our team, and these batting averages are holding true, and that's a concern. That's a concern.
And you mentioned a guy like Josh Naylor who struggled mightily, and he's a piece of this offense that it feels like when he's playing well, it's contagious, right? He's hitting the bombs. He's bringing the momentum. He's picking guys up. So when he falters, it seems like the team falters. And right now, everybody, it seems like, is in a funk.
We're talking about Kansas City. Minnesota's only 2.5 games behind us.
There's the reality, Bruce. We finished 3rd in the division. God forbid.
Well, today is the finale of the series, and indeed, somebody is going to conclude this series as the first-place team in the American League Central. Whether it's our team or the Kansas City Royals remains to be seen. The rain seems to have cleared out of the area, so we're going to play ball today. Waka versus Bybee. What a critical game, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, the good news or bad news, right? You've been in this slump. You've faltered, like I mentioned, sub 500 baseball since July, I believe. But the good news still is you played well enough in the first half of the season that you're right there. Now it's going to be who wants it the most, and it starts with your best pitcher today in Bybee going out and avoiding a killer sweep.
What is our largest lead that we had in this division this year? It had to be 7-8 games at least.
I would say it might have been 9, Bruce. It's a great question. Damn near double digits.
I was 19 years old in 1969. Oh, God. Growing up on the north side of Chicago and then the suburbs of Chicago, the north side, the Cubs had built what seemed to be an insurmountable lead. That was the first year of divisional play, by the way. The Cubs were in the East. And I think I'd have to research this, Ryan, but I think the Cubs had as much of as a double-digit lead on the nearest competitor in the National League East. They went into Shea Stadium in New York to play the Mets, and they got swept. And that started their downfall, and that occurred in August. By the beginning of September, they were already trailing the Mets, and I think significantly, and they wound up losing the division by, I think, double digits. That was a miracle year for the Mets. They won the division going away. They beat the Braves in the playoffs. They went into the World Series against the Baltimore Orioles as a huge underdog. That was the first of 3 years in a row that Baltimore won the American League pennant under Earl Weaver, Frank Robinson, Brooks Robinson. Tremendous team, tremendous pitching with Jim Palmer and Cuellar, McNally, Dobson. Just a tremendous, tremendous ball club. And the Mets beat them in 5 games. That's baseball. Now, I only bring this up because this is starting to remind me of that year, Ryan, and I'm scared about it.
Yeah, I just looked it up, Bruce. June 26th, the Guardians had a 10-game lead in the AL Central.
Yeah. Well, we conclude this series with Kansas City today, and then let me tell you that we have more games. We play at Kansas City for 3 after we play Pittsburgh for 3. Following this, that's at home against Pittsburgh for 3, and then we go to Kansas City for 3. Then we travel to Los Angeles to play the Dodgers for 3, and they can't let up because they're being challenged in that division by both San Diego and Arizona for the divisional crown. We then go to the south side of Chicago to play the hapless Chicago White Sox, but it seems like the only team that the White Sox can beat are the Guardians. We come home to 4 against Tampa Bay. We host Minnesota for 4. We travel to St. Louis to play 3. We come home to Cincinnati to play 2. And we conclude with Houston for 3. Now, Kansas City will be taking on Cleveland for the 4 games, against Minnesota at home for 3, at New York to play the Yankees for 3. So they don't have a slouch. They don't have an easy schedule at all, Ryan. At Pittsburgh for 3, home to Detroit for 3, home to San Francisco for 3, at Washington for 3, and they conclude in Atlanta for 3. Now, I don't think Atlanta at that point will be, Philly seems to have wrapped things up, unless things drastically change in the National League East and Atlanta gets back into it seriously with Philadelphia for that National League East crown. All they'll be doing is playing for a home field, perhaps in wild card, and right now they're trailing both San Diego and Arizona if things stand the way they do. The point being, Kansas City has some tough series ahead of them, although it's easier than what the Guardians have going down the stretch, theoretically, if you base it on records. And there's also this. Kansas City has by far the best record of any team in the American League Central against teams from the American League Central. Now, Minnesota tonight will conclude their series at home against Atlanta. Thank goodness Minnesota lost. Then they host Toronto for 3. They're at Tampa Bay for 4. They go to Kansas City for 3. They host the LA Angels for 3. They host Cincinnati for 3. They come here to Cleveland for 4. They're at Boston for 3. Boston's fighting for a wild card. Right now they're the odd man out. And then they go home to Miami for 3 and conclude the season with 3 against Baltimore. It still comes down to beating major league teams, no matter how severe or the schedule appears to be, Ryan.
Yeah, the road's been tough post All-Star break, and it's not really going to get any easier here. You got to pull away or get some magic, beat the Dodgers a couple times, hopefully, but that last series against Houston are going to be some very, very meaningful baseball games.
So it comes down to this. We'll see what our young team is made of. And, the thing is, Kansas City's a young team, too. Very young team. So we figure to have some severe competition in this division for years to come. And then, of course, there's Minnesota in the mix as well. But and don't just count Detroit in the next 3 years either, because they've got a nice young ball club as well. And I like some of those young pitchers that they do feature. All right, so keep your fingers crossed. Time for me to give my AFC predictions for the upcoming NFL campaign. Now, next week, we will have the start of the NFL season. And as I said, Mark Lawrence will be joining us to give us the top games. And there are going to be quite a few interesting NFL games to open up the regular season, which we will dive into. Let me start with the AFC East, where I think it's pretty obvious that Baltimore is the consensus pick. There's no reason for me to go elsewhere than did I say Baltimore? I meant Buffalo. there's no reason to go elsewhere but Buffalo. I mean, with Josh Allen and company, I think they are certainly entering a season where they feel they've got something to prove because they have underachieved, sort of like the Dallas of the AFC, if you will, underachieving in the playoffs. Are they quite good enough to represent the AFC and go into the Super Bowl? This is going to be a very telling year for Josh Allen and that team, but I've got to pick them first. I go with Miami second because of the strides they made a year ago. The New York Jets are going to be an interesting team to watch because Rodgers is back and supposedly healthy. So I'll go with them third, but he could go one way or the other, too, at his age. And then New England, of course, I think is going to be really hapless. Any comments on those divisional predictions?
Yeah, I don't think it's any question. New England is going to be at the basement of that division. And the Jets are, as you mentioned, one of the most maybe mysterious teams heading into this season. Will Aaron Rodgers retain MVP form? If so, he's got the crew around him to make real strides and go to the playoffs and make some noise. But I'll take them to go third. I'll actually take Buffalo second. I think this is a huge year for Josh Allen to see if he's really capable of lifting his team.
Tua in Miami, number one?
I'm going with Tua in Miami and number one. I think you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. You have Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert. Your offensive skill pieces are top of the NFL, right? I think Tua is a very formidable quarterback. He got paid. We'll see if he gets complacent. Mike McDaniel's a great offensive mind. I think he has enough over a 17-game season to win that division, but the question for them will be, can they win a playoff game?
Well, they faltered going down the stretch last year, and I was down there, as I will be this year, for that holiday season. And man, we were in the Keys for Christmas and New Year's, and that's Miami television. We got Miami television, and that's the people that live in the Keys. They get Miami TV, and they were all over the Dolphins because of that, conclusion to the season, which was extremely disappointing considering the anticipation of, a real good postseason. AFC West, no-brainer. You got to go with the defending world champs, do you not? So the Kansas City Chiefs are an easy pick for me. But I wouldn't be surprised if the LA Chargers give them a challenge this year. With Harbaugh at the helm and with Herbert teaming up with this storied coach, I think they're going to be a very formidable team and a very, very serious playoff contender in the West, and they may indeed challenge Kansas City. Then take your pick between Denver and Vegas. They're both going to stink, but Kansas City and the Chargers will be an interesting race, Ryan.
Yeah, I think for sure, whether you want to say 3 and 4 is going to slot them either way you want between Denver and the Raiders. And then I do enjoy, or not enjoy, I actually don't enjoy Harbaugh's, but I think he is a very competent coach. He's supposed to be this quarterback whisperer. You have an amazing, supposed to be MVP talent in Herbert. I still think they're a couple pieces away to ever compete with Kansas City in that division.
AFC South's a tough one to pick, but I'm going to go with Stroud because of the strides that Stroud and Houston made a year ago and, of course, defeating us in that playoff game. Jacksonville, I'm between Houston and Jacksonville. I'm going with Houston because of what they did a year ago, and there's no substitute. You've heard me say for years there's no substitute for playoff experience no matter what sport you're talking. But Jacksonville, I think Trevor Lawrence and company really have something to prove. That the honeymoon is over. The honeymoon is over. I was on the I was on the Big Play Cleveland show the other day, and Gab and Nick and Chris were asking me about our division and all the different division. When I talked about the AFC South, I was really torn about because of Houston and Jacksonville, because Trevor Lawrence now has really got to prove something to those Jacksonville fans. Does he not? Yeah. Indianapolis, Tennessee. I'm going with Indy third, Tennessee fourth. That could be flip-flopped. I don't know how to predict Indianapolis. They may be a sleeper surprise team, but I just don't think that they're good enough. And, of course, with a new coach at Tennessee, I can't see that. They've lost Henry now. I don't see them at all. But I think it's going to be interesting between Houston and Jacksonville, Ryan.
I think Tennessee will be better than a lot of people are anticipating with Callahan coming over. I think Will Levis will be okay. I don't think they're going to be that good, so I will have them finishing fourth. Now, Bruce, this is where we differ. My winner for the AFC South is actually going to be the Colts. Okay. They were very good last season with Gardner Minshew. They lost Anthony Richardson super early, and they still made it happen, right? You bring in Anthony Richardson, who you project to play a full 17 games. He truly is one of those game changers, the Lamar Jackson types, where he is able to go win a game by himself. You have Shane Steichen, who I think is a great head coach. Mind you, he was the OC for Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts when they went to the Super Bowl. They lost him. Their back half, remember at last year, Bruce? They were awful. I think they really miss Shane Steichen. I think he's doing a great job in Indianapolis. I think he can compete in that division. I actually have them to win it. Then I'll take C.J. Stroud and the Texans, and then I'll take Jacksonville to finish third.
Why don't you have more respect for Jacksonville?
I think, you know what? If Trevor Lawrence was going to wow me, I think it should have happened by now, Bruce. I really do.
Maybe they're still feeling the after effect of Urban Meyer. I don't know.
That'd be very well so. He made a fire there.
That brings us to the AFC North, and I've got to be the homer and pick our Browns, as I did the other day on the Big Play Cleveland show with the crew. Let me say this. I think you can make a very, very, very legitimate argument for any of the 4 teams in this division to win this division. It is without question, and I'll argue with anyone, the toughest division in the National Football League. It's incredibly balanced. We're probably going to beat the you-know-what out of each other, which brings us then to the other conference games and the opposite conference games. But I'll go with Cleveland only because I want to give the Browns the benefit of the doubt, as I have here on the show. I'm giving Watson the benefit of the doubt. They've got the talent to go a long way this year. You don't want to miss our show if they underachieve or let me down. You don't want to miss it. But I am giving the Browns the benefit of the doubt. And I'll tell you what, you could make a case for any of these 4 teams in any set order. I think it's that difficult to pick. I'll go with Baltimore second, Cincy, and then Pittsburgh, but they could all be flip-flopped. Any combination could be the final result of this division. It is just incredibly difficult to predict, but I'll be the homer here and pick the Browns. But like I say, I don't have any more idea if they're going to win the division than I do Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, or Baltimore. It could go to any of these 4 teams. I feel that strongly about it.
I feel the same way as you, Bruce. I'm going to go the same order. Call me a homer if you will. But without a doubt, I look at this Browns roster, and there's no question, no inch of doubt that outside of the quarterback room, this team is uber talented. They would stand toe-to-toe with any roster in the NFL. And that being said, I'll go the Browns to win their first AFC North title, Bruce.
Who do you see the toughest competition?
I still got to go Baltimore.
Well, regular season, it's hard to argue. Postseason with Lamar Jackson, he's underachieved. We know Burrow, if he stays healthy, has been outstanding and excellent in the postseason with Cincinnati. And who knows what's going to happen with Pittsburgh? Will it be Russell Wilson? Will it be Justin Fields? I don't know. All I know is they've been making the playoffs with no quarterbacks, and now they have 2. So there you have it. Next week, we'll start predicting the games with Mark Lawrence. Speaking of Mark Lawrence, the first full week of college football begins this Labor Day weekend. We'll pick Mark's brain, editor-publisher of the Playbook, next on Bonus Time with Drennan here on the Big Play Sports Network. Now, here is the risk that Browns had to take with Great to have you back with us. Bonus Time with Drennan here on the Big Play Sports Network. And we start the first full weekend here on Labor Day with college football. And that means Mark Lawrence, editor-publisher of the Playbook. Here it is. Playbooksports.com is your website. And on the cover, Andy Reid this year on Mark's publication. How are you, partner? Welcome to another football season.
Well, I'm getting ready for the football season, Bruce, and I know you are too. It's really, really nice to see the first full week of the season kick off this weekend.
And I'm going to kick off with the biggest game of the weekend, and that is Clemson and Georgia. The Dogs are the number 1 team in the country. Clemson, number 14. Dabo Swinney versus this tremendous Georgia team that very well may have won the national championship again last year had not been for the loss of Alabama and the committee snubbing them as not one of the top 4 teams in the country. You and I have already discussed this. That's a joke. They certainly were. I can't believe, though, they're a 13.5-point favorite over Clemson.
Yeah, it's a big number, Bruce, especially to a coach like Dabo Swinney. Anyway, like him or not, bottom line is the guy wins football games. He's proven it in the past, and he's got a big, big chip on his shoulder coming into the season this year. The cautionary tale for me in this game, however, might be the fact that if you take Alabama out of Georgia's schedule, they've won 45 straight games in a row against all teams other than Alabama, which means on this playing field here, they're likely to beat Clemson. And sometimes when I go into a game and I know that I'm going to beat a team, although I'm not going to win the game, I'm a little bit apprehensive about that. Bottom line here is I just can't let 13.5 points go by. I got to grab the points with Clemson.
We'll see how good Clemson is, because we know for sure that Georgia is the real deal. Big Ten next. Penn State, number 8 in the country. I know you're not a fan of their coach, nor am I, quite frankly. They're an 8.5-point favorite against West Virginia.
This is a West Virginia team. I can assure you they've had this game circled in lipstick since last year. When they went in there last year, they went up to Penn State, season opening game, and what did James Franklin do? He had a game won in a rout. They were taking the kneel down to get off the field, and he ran a trick play and scored a touchdown. That does not sit well with coaches, and it does not sit well with teams. You can best believe you're going to get West Virginia's best effort in this game. And I also like the fact that the last 20 years, they're 19-1 outright in their home opening game. Give me West Virginia in the upset.
Next is North Carolina out of the ACC. They're a mere 1.5-point favorite at Minnesota against the Golden Gophers.
Yeah, it's a little tricky here. North Carolina takes out without Drake May this football season here. You don't like taking out road favorites with the first-time starting quarterback doing just that for a program, which gets me to looking to the Minnesota side of the game. I'm not a big, huge PJ Fleck fan. I think he's more gibberish than he is a coach. But the bottom line is Minnesota is perennially has been a bowl team here. I got to play them as a home dog in their season opener.
TCU's a 9.5-point favorite at Stanford. What's happened to that Stanford program? Every year when the Pac-12 was in existence, Mark, they were a serious contender.
They were a big-time contender, and they completely fell off the map. Now, I don't know if the entrance was just a little bit too tough for the grades for the players to have to get into, and they said, heck with this. We can go to other schools, and we don't have to come in with these diplomas that the Stanford's looking for. They lost the good quality players. But what they do have back this year, Bruce, is 20 starting returners coming back for Stanford. That's a ton of points, a ton of players, I should say, to be giving a team that's an underdog in a football game like this. Look out, I think Stanford could be sneaky this football season.
Next is Miami and Florida, and I find this matchup very intriguing because for years, the University of Florida would not even schedule Miami. Florida State would play Miami, but not Florida. They thought they were superior. They thought they were above. They were in the Southeastern Conference. Miami was an upstart. I think they were afraid of them, quite frankly. This goes back to the Spurrier days, as you well know, Mark.
Sure.
And indeed, they are playing this year, and Miami is actually, the odds makers have got them a slight favor, 2.5 against the Gators.
There's a lot of love for Miami out there right now, Bruce, as we speak, and it's largely due to the job that Mario Cristobal did once again in the recruiting wars, that and the transfer portal. He really stocked up the roster. But you know my disdain for Mario Cristobal. He's all recruit and no X's and O's. The guy gets outcoached every football game he plays. He was fired at Florida International as their head coach. People forget that, Bruce, before he went on to become an assistant at Alabama and then made his marquee in his name here. I do not like Miami of Florida in this game, none whatsoever. You got the Florida 39-1 in home opening games in the swamp here. Give me Florida Gators plus the points here.
It's a non-conference game for Miami, but are you saying with that statement that you do not see them contending with Clemson, Florida State, who we'll get to in a minute, or NC State in the ACC?
Well, they're supposed to, but I wouldn't be at all surprised that he disappoints once again this year. He came this close, Bruce, to tearing up that contract in Miami, eating it. The problem is the contract is so ridiculously ludicrous that they couldn't do it. I think here he gets upset in this football game. I think Miami maybe makes a bowl game this year, but we could see Mario Cristobal on the sidelines come next year.
Hey, Ryan, I guess Mark doesn't like Cristobal.
I can tell.
I got to ask you about Ohio State, only because it's Ohio State. It's a ridiculous number. I know what you're going to predict in this one, 48.5 points. It was actually higher than that. It's gone down just a tad. But my goodness, how much of an effort is Ohio State going to put out in this game against an overmatched Zips team?
Well, what you do in cases like this, Bruce, is you got the little brother against the big brother in this football game here. In-state teams, if you will, but first game of the season to lay what was 50 points is ridiculous. 50-point favorites. I think we outlined this in our newsletter, where something like, don't hold me to this, like 16 and 28 to the spread. They really struggle in games like this. And the reason they do is because they don't want to show anything on the game film to show. They don't need to go out and win this game 73-0. Ohio State's already a number 1 or number 2 ranked team. I think they win the game, but not by enough.
Yeah, and I was a guest on one of our other shows here on the net the other day, Mark. I said basically the same thing. And look at it this way. All Akron has to do is score a touchdown and a field goal. Now all of a sudden it's 60 points. So, I mean, what does Ohio State have to prove? Next game, go ahead.
What you made a great point there, Bruce, is Akron has to score a touchdown and a field goal. If they do just that, and you play the game over the total, you're assuring yourself you're not going to lose 2 times if Akron scores 10 points. So there's a nice little play to be made there in a game where there's a big spread and a low total.
This is a great matchup. Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish, playing Texas A&M. The Aggies are number 20 in the country. I know they're very anxious to renew their rivalry with the Texas Longhorns now that they're in the SEC. But the Irish rank number 7. This is a dandy matchup. How do you see it? A&M's a 3-point favorite.
Yeah, this is one of the better games on the card this weekend for sure, Bruce. I'm a big, huge A&M guy this year. I love them to start the football season. I like the coaching change they made. This team has been well fortified, well stocked with recruits. Give Jimbo Fisher some due. He went out and he recruited some top-notch players there. They're still there. This football team is really deeply talented with returning starters. And here's the key to the game to me, Bruce. Notre Dame is going to be starting their 5 offensive linemen. 3 of them are freshmen and 2 of them are sophomores. Very young green offensive line for Notre Dame here. I guess green should be the name for Notre Dame. But the bottom line here is I do like Texas A&M.
Okay. Next is Southern Cal, now a Big Ten school, against LSU. This is Kelly, ranked number 13 in the country, against the Trojans, number 23. LSU, a 4.5-point favorite. How do you see this one?
I think this game sets up real well for Lincoln Riley here, Bruce. He took a lot of heat last year for what didn't happen for that football program, and he had no excuses. I mean, he had the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, and he still couldn't cut the mustard. Now he goes into Las Vegas, where there's going to be a lot of fans coming over here from Los Angeles to this football game here. They played before here in Los Angeles. I think this is upset in the making here for Southern Cal. Give me Lincoln Riley, who's never been a dog too many times, plus the points.
And then there's Boston College visiting Florida State. What a game in Dublin, Ireland. Florida State getting really manhandled by Georgia Tech. I don't think the score indicates how they were physically abused in this game. How does Florida State rebound after that incredible disappointment? And now, all of a sudden, they're facing the reality of not making the playoffs.
Well, if they lose another game, they're for certain going to be doing that, at least early on, because they'll knock themselves right out of the polls completely with the loss here in this football game. I do like Boston College here. The heat is all on Florida State. And I think the key factor in the game here, Bruce, is the fact that Florida State played last week in Dublin, Ireland. They're coming back with no rest. That's a long travel fatigue factor here for Florida State here. I would have loved this game if Florida State would have beat Georgia Tech. I would have been all over it like white on rice. But I still do like Boston College's chances to stay close in this football game. Give me the Eagles plus the points.
And how about Michigan in the new era beginning in Ann Arbor? They're a 21.5-point favorite at home against Fresno State, who can't be taken for granted ever.
No, they can't. They're always been a sneaky, sticky, good football team. And you got Michigan here. I mean, they climbed the mountain last year. You went 15-0. You lost a ton of your players. You lost your head coach, and you're out there laying more than 3 touchdowns in a football game. You can't do that. My conscience won't let me do that. I have to grab the points with Fresno State. I think Michigan might be a better team this year than people are anticipating, but they're not this good yet, Bruce. Give me Fresno State plus the points.
Here's the book. It's the Playbook. Playbooksports.com is your website. You see Andy Reid there on the cover. Mark Lawrence, editor, publisher. We've got this college season underway. Next week, we'll get to pick the top college games for Mark to handicap, as well as the top pro games as the NFL season gets underway. Talk to you then, partner.
Be well, Bruce. Have a great weekend.
All right, Mark Lawrence. When we get back, we'll have the Ask Bruce segment here on Bonus Time with Drennan, here on the Big Play Sports Network. Now, here is the risk that Brown had to take with Great to have you back. Bonus time with Drennan here on the Big Play Sports Network. Well, Ryan, first big weekend of college football. We had that game with Georgia Tech and Florida State last week in Dublin, Ireland. And first of all, what a shocker that game was. My goodness.
Yeah, that was a shocker. Can't feel bad for Florida State. I don't really care. I feel bad that they missed out on the playoffs last year, but that was last year. It's a brand new year. But I wanted to get your opinion real quick. I don't know if you were able to watch College Game Day, but Nick Saban obviously made his debut. I think I'm going to really enjoy him as an analyst now.
I did not see him. Tell me why you liked him so much.
I thought he was, well, obviously, first and foremost, he's just a football genius. That's
right.
No doubt about it. I think he has a great personality for it. Honestly,
He did show some
you see a lot of
personality.
these
That's what I was
coaches
gonna
when they're
ask
on the
you.
sidelines, right? It's kind of different
Right.
now. They come out, they come into the media, and they're just much more relaxed. I thought he did a really good job, and I think I'm going to look forward to him this entire season.
Well, Mark made some interesting picks in our first week here. Obviously, one of the ones that stands out to me is West Virginia getting 8.5 against Penn State. He loves the Mountaineers.
Yeah, I mean, Penn State, they've never been able to get it done. I think we're almost to that point where they're going to move on from James Franklin. It seems a little overdue at this point. Maybe they're riding it out with Drew Allard to see what they have, but it's a big season for them. And, I mean, you got Ohio State. Michigan is going to be good still, maybe not as good, but then Oregon coming in now, they might be slotted as the fourth best team.
Yeah, and I found it interesting also. He really is high on A&M, not only in this game against Notre Dame, giving up 3, but he likes A&M in the SEC this year.
Well, I will be tailing
Not
him.
to win it, but he likes him a lot.
I'll tell you this, I will be tailing all of his picks because NFL season last year, he did me wonders.
Another interesting pick that he had was taking Southern Cal, getting 4.5 in that game against LSU. Wow, LSU's being picked by some to vie for the SEC championship.
Yeah, you're going to have to replace Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr. A lot of questions around, Brian Kelly. It'll be an interesting season for them for sure. A lot of moving parts.
Yeah, and then obviously Miami and Florida. That's a good one too. He's really down on Cristobal. But what I said, you're much younger. Florida wouldn't. It was beneath Florida to lower themselves and schedule Miami. Of course, they had a guy by the name of Schnellenberger, Erickson, Jimmy Johnson. Florida was afraid of him, even when Spurrier, going back to those Spurrier days. But they got him scheduled this year, and he likes them to beat Miami.
Yeah, I don't blame him for being down on Mario Cristobal. We saw last season the biggest blunder in all of college football last year. Should have just took the knee. He decided to run it for God knows why. Ended up losing the ball and losing that game. And you could tell in that moment a lot of his players started questioning Mario Cristobal, and he's going to have to redeem himself this season.
Ask Bruce Segment. Fire away.
Alrighty. Hey, Bruce, hypothetical question. If Jose Ramirez ever played for the Yankees in his career instead of Cleveland, do you think he would have won an MVP by now?
Oh, absolutely. And if not, the batting average this year leaves a lot to be desired compared to what Soto and Judge have there. I'll tell you another guy that you can make a case for is Bobby Witt. I mean, he's having an absolute tremendous season for Kansas City and should get that due respect. But yes, without a question, I totally agree that if he was in New York, he would get that MVP. Yes.
Alrighty. Hey, Bruce, how much blame do you put on Stephen Vogt for the Guardians' recent collapse?
Oh, I don't think you can put much. He's done a great job, Carl Willis, with that bullpen. This is baseball. You have peaks and valleys. The team is still well above the 500 mark. A lot of people didn't even think that they would be as above 500 as many games as they are right now. I mean, especially tied for first place here at the end of August, entering the critical stretch month of September. I can't blame Vogt at all. I think it's he's still going to be he's going to finish first or second. Unless there's a total collapse. Unless there's a total collapse, he's going to be first or second for Manager of the Year in the American League. I think it's a good bet.
Alrighty, hey Bruce, which of these has been the most surprising to you? Stephen Kwan's struggles, Josh Naylor's struggles, or the bullpen showing a little bit of cracks?
Well, the bullpen is human. Just Scott Barlow and here and there. But overall, how do you knock this bullpen at all? They've been the best in baseball statistically all season long. Class A is money. But Kwan or Naylor, huh? I am surprised that Quan has so drastically slipped in the batting average from what we said earlier in the show from at one point 390. Now he's down to 299. I am shocked at that. Naylor is still supplying the power. He's had a good power year, even though the batting average isn't there. So I would have to say Quan, I guess, based on what he showed us in that first half.
Alrighty, hey Bruce, can you rank the AFC North head coaches? Obviously, it's Jim Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin, Kevin Stefanski, and Zach Taylor.
John Harbaugh, you mean?
John, excuse me. Yes.
Yeah. Well, certainly Harbaugh has won a Super Bowl. So has Tomlin. Taylor has not yet. Stefanski has not yet. So obviously you got to go with Harbaugh or Tomlin. Take your choice. They're both right there every single year. Tomlin has achieved with some time since Roethlisberger expired. And were retired and expired, and when he retired, he has been seeking a quarterback. Now he has two, for goodness sakes. But Stefanski and Taylor they've still got some to prove, obviously.
Alrighty, last one. Hey, Bruce, if Deshaun Watson plays horrible this season and it all goes south, do you think it should cost general manager Andrew Berry his job?
No. And you can't fire the owner. Does that answer your question? I mean, it was Haslam that approved this. And I supported the move. I don't think Tampa Bay is going to win the NFC with Baker Mayfield. I don't think they're going to even come close, even though he had a real good year last year and they played well in the playoffs. I don't see that happening, and I certainly didn't see that happening in Cleveland. So I advocated the move. But it really was a gamble. Let's face it. I've said over and over again, if we don't make it to the Super Bowl within this 5-year contract that sets this franchise back at least 5 years. Ooh, heaven forbid. But that is all the time we have for this week's version of Bonus Time with Drennan. Hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget now, next week, we will, of course, dive into the Guardians as we're going to be in the month of September after the Labor Day weekend. Oh, brother, is that going to be something? And obviously, the start of the NFL season and more big college games. I'm Bruce Drennan on behalf of Ryan Smith. You have a good one. We'll see you next week on Bonus Time with Drennan here on the Big Play Sports Network. Until then, as always, and most importantly, you remember,